Okay, everyone, we are resuming our public portion of the Board of Behavioral Science. Today is May 5th. The time is 1:07 p.m. We are here in Orange County. My name is Max Esposti. I'm the board chair. Pronounce him as. And I believe we are resuming with Roseanne, introducing our next agenda item, which is number 28. And which is the discussion and possible action regarding SB 373, Mehivar, Board of Behavioral Sciences, Board of Psychology, and Medical Board of California, licensees and registrants' addresses. Thank you, Roseanne.
Thanks, Max. Yes, so this bill would prohibit the Board of Behavioral Sciences and the Psychology Board from disclosing the full address of record of licensees and registrants on the internet website. Medical Board is in the title. They've been taken out of it for various reasons, but it would apply to Board of Behavioral Sciences and Psych Board. Instead of having the full address of record show up on the Breeze website search, only the city, state, county, and zip code would show up in such a search. This would not apply to secondary documents linked to a board's website that may contain an address of record. For example, if somebody has disciplinary action, the person's address often appears in there several times. And so it would not apply to that. That could continue to apply. And the reason that was written in is because for the board to go back and redact all past disciplinary actions would be a huge task. And so each board must still provide a license or registrant's full address upon request. So it would be like a Public Record Act. So in existing law, we have, as we've discussed before today, Business and Professions Code 27, which requires certain boards under DCA to provide information on the internet about their licensees and registrants and the status of every person licensed. It needs to be provided to individuals requesting it in accordance with the California Public Records Act and the Information Practices Act of 1977. The information that is disclosed is not allowed to include personal information, including home telephone number, date of birth, or social security number. So those particular pieces of information are protected. But an address of record is required to be disclosed. The law does specify that in lieu of a home address, a licensee may provide a post office box number or other address for disclosure on the internet. So if they don't want to provide their home address to the board, they can provide a P.O. box or their company address instead, and then that will be public. So under this bill, the board would be prohibited from disclosing a full address of record. Instead, on Breeze lookup, you would just see the city, state, county, and zip code. And the same thing for a Board of Psychology. And any request for public information for an address would need to be provided by the board, though, within 10 business days. And this bill is being sponsored by a number of agencies, including CalPIC, CAMP, and NASW California. And there's a full list of sponsors. There's a number of them under support and opposition in the analysis. But the sponsors are seeking to protect the well-being and safety of licensees and registrants who are performing psychotherapy. So it's not quite so easy to access their home address. They note that having a personal home address on there can make the licensees vulnerable to stalking and harassment, particularly for those who work in sensitive areas such as domestic violence or child welfare services. There's 12 boards under DCA, including some healing arts boards, that are not included in Business and Professions Code 27. So they are not required, and they do not provide a home address or a street address. They only provide the city, state, county, and zip. So it is not unprecedented for a DCA board to not have to require an address. But for our particular board, we are, unless the law changes, we are required to provide it because Business and Professions Code specifically includes the Board of Behavioral Sciences in the list of boards that are required to comply with it. So that's the reason that we have to do it that way. In looking at some of the legislative history of Business and Professions Code Section 27, it was put in place in the late 90s and then amended around 2000. it required some, it included some but not all DCA boards and bureaus. And there was really not an explanation given at the time, looking at past bill analyses of why some DCA boards were included and not others. At one point, one of the committee analysis, the legislature raised that question, but it was never, no explanation was offered in any future follow-up analyses for the bill. So we're not really sure, nobody's really sure why those particular boards were selected, but we were one that was selected and we're included in it, so a law change is needed if we're not gonna comply with it. So that's kind of the history there. We've asked in our discussions with the sponsors for two minor clarifications in reading the bill. Business and Professions Code Section 27A permits a licensee or registrant to provide an alternate address, but the bill requires the board to establish a process for providing a licensee or registrant's complete address upon request. It might be helpful to specify which address the board must disclose if requested. Would that be the one that the board may have for some sort of internal use, or the one for public disclosure? So I would recommend that instead of using the term complete address in 27A, that it specifies address of record. And also the second amendment that might be helpful, there's a sentence in the bill that says, this section shall not apply to secondary documents linked to the board's internet website, which may contain an address of record. I would recommend just using the term address there, because the courts, they aren't necessarily complying with the address of record. They might put a couple of different addresses if the person has a couple different addresses in there. And the board does not have any control over that, and then it's in a court document. So we can't just go in and change it. So those are my two really minor technical amendments. I've talked with one of the sponsors about that to see if they would be, if it was something that they would entertain, and they seemed like they were amenable to that. So just some very minor. I don't think that it's worth, not supporting the bill if it's not done, but I think it's just something that would be good cleanup. We think the fiscal for the bill would be minor. The BREEZE system would just need to be modified slightly so that those, the street addresses were hidden. DCA already does that for some other boards, like nursing board, physical therapy board. So with that, I will open it up to discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Are there any questions or comments of motions from the board? Okay, we can go to our audience and see if there are any comments. Thank you, Ben.
Good afternoon, Ben Caldwell, MFT. It's a good bill. I'd respectfully request a position of support. One question is maybe more of a question for the sponsoring organizations. It seems like if this bill passes, more licensees and registrants would actually use their home addresses in their as their address of record with the board, knowing that it would not be subject to being shown on the website. I have a very small concern about what might happen to those folks who are using their home addresses if they are later involved in some kind of a disciplinary proceeding. I understand you don't want to go back and redact old documents. That's much too much of an ask. But would it be feasible, would the sponsors be amenable to some kind of discussion about disciplinary documents moving forward, and the possibility that disciplinary documents in the future may not display the licensee's or registrant's full, potentially home address? But either way that conversation goes, request a support vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I was actually thinking of that. Watch out for
danger zone. Good afternoon. Kristen Roscoe from the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. We are so pleased to co-sponsor this bill with our colleagues at NASW and CalPIC. This bill, we feel, addresses a really strong need from our membership. Thankfully, many licensees don't encounter the perils of being stalked or harassed by a current or former patient, but the reality is that it does unfortunately happen. And so this measure would just be an attempt to put up some additional barriers to an easy Google search, while at the same time addressing the financial impact to, particularly those, registrants who may not have the financial means quite yet to afford a PO box. They're not free. And a lot of our membership also work in, the nonprofit sector where, to expect someone to expend the funds to pay for a PO box it's really asking a lot of our membership. So we really appreciate the board's consideration of this bill and urge support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments of, yes, Rebecca?
Yes, Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW California, another co-sponsor. This is a bill that protects all of our licensees and registrants. We've been hearing from our members for a number of years as more and more people are doing telehealth and working from home. That is their address of record. But I also have heard from former interns that certain schools like Sac State, they want their students to start the whole registration process even before they graduate. And so they have to put their home address, and being students and the cost of a P.O. box, it's prohibitive, and they've been complaining for a long time. And I also think this bill just catches up with modern life. I mean, I think back in the day, we didn't worry about privacy so much, but now we're really concerned about privacy, and I think that this bill really makes sense.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion in support of the bill as presented. Any seconds? Okay. Sergio.
I'll second it.
Wonderful. And the motion's on the floor. Any other comments or for the motion on the floor? Again, to the audience, any other comments on the motion on the floor? Are we good? You good? Making sure. Roseanne?
I have a question regarding the technical cleanup about address references in 27.5A and B. Do you want me to separately continue to work with the author to address that?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. In the language, if we can add that for the technical changes. Yes,
Regarding address.
regarding the address. How do we incorporate what I did like what Ben was adding in regards, but that's obviously for the sponsor. I'm confident this is part of the conversation. The intent goes in that direction, so there is no need to do any additional recommendations, I'm guessing, right, Rebecca?
Rebecca Gonzalez with NASW California. I hadn't heard that particular comment before, but I think it makes perfect sense, and I think it's something that we could discuss internally going forward. I can't speak on behalf of all the co-sponsors, but I think we would be very friendly to that. But I don't think that would be
Right,
part of this
no.
motion, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a condition of anything. It just, I think it was a great idea too.
I can weigh in a little bit on that too, and Steve, you can, when we were talking about, and I don't know how Board of Psychology would feel about this, but the main concern with the secondary documents was the past, because there's so many, we've been a licensing board for
Right.
many, many years, and there's disciplinary documents. I don't think it was as big a deal to go through and redact
Right.
for, but there was a fiscal impact to having to basically hire somebody temporarily to go through and redact thousands and thousands of documents. That was more the concern rather than moving forward.
It sounded like, yeah, everyone has it's like, there is a common interest of protections and privacy and safety. Okay, if there are no other comments, we have a motion on the floor, moved by me, second by Eleanor. And Christina, we can call. Thank you.
Yvette Caceres Willis,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich. John Sovek,
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Abstain?
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now that concluded item 28 in the agenda. We're moving to 29, which is the discussion and possible action regarding SB 509, Portantino, school employee and pupil training, youth mental and behavioral health, and mental health education. And back to Roseanne.
Yeah, this bill works to update a recent law change a little bit more to try to sort of beef up the youth and mental and behavioral health training that's in schools. So this particular bill is proposing to require the Department of Education to make sure at least 75% of their classified and certified school employees at each school who have contact with pupils have received training in youth behavioral health. And also additionally, it requires pupils in grades 1 to 12 to receive evidence-based, age-appropriate mental health education from trained instructors at least once in elementary school, once in junior high, and once in high school. So a little bit of background, the Department of Education is currently already required to recommend best practices and identify evidence-based training for schools to address youth and behavioral health, but it doesn't particularly require any specific percentage of staff that needs to be trained. It sets certain criteria on what the training is going to look like, what it instructs on, what the qualifications are, and it requires every school, a county of Office of Education that offers at least a course in health education to middle or high school students to, in that course, include instruction in mental health covering specific content areas, but it doesn't specify in what grades and if you know, how often it needs to happen. So it's just kind of a one-time thing. The law currently already requires the mental health instruction be appropriate for use with pupils of all races, genders, sexual orientation, ethnic and cultural background, and those with disabilities and English learners. And it requires the Department of Education to develop a plan to expand mental health instruction in California by January of 2024. So this particular school puts in the requirements to have the 75% of the staff have the training, and the students receive a training once in elementary, once in middle, and once in high school. So the author's intent is to kind of get some specific requirements for training, kind of more in line with other mandated trainings for school personnel. Like school personnel are already required to have mandated reporting training and CPR training. So this puts mental health training kind of on that same level. The author notes that in the 2020 from a report from the California Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission recommended that the state act to make schools centers of wellness and healing where students' mental health needs can be met. So then I have included a link to that report if you are interested in it and taking a deeper dive into that. So the bill is sponsored by the California Council for Community Behavioral Health Agencies. It has a number of supporters as well. So with that, we can discuss.
Thank you, Roseanne. It sounds like a straightforward bill, but you never know. So, are there any comments? Yes, Russ.
I was wondering if you, sorry, Ross Early, public member, if you know why the CTA, Teachers Association is opposing it?
I don't have that information. It wasn't provided, but I would guess that it might have to do something to the effect of the mandated training of the 75%.
Thank you, Ross. And Abigail? And then
I think what,
just
just
had a moment.
Abigail Ortega, my concern is that they want at least one time training for like elementary, which is like K through, through 6, and then at least one time for junior high, and then at least one time for high school. And I just think that that's so little, right? That's not enough training. You can't say like, oh, kids in first grade receive this mental health training and they're gonna remember all of that and retain it like in the 5th or 6th grade. So I wish they would add language like regular and consistent mental health training for the staff and for educating the students. And then I'm just also curious like why they came up with 75% of its classified and certificated school employees who have direct contact with the pupils. Why not 100%? So it's
Yeah,
just
They didn't provide that information. I'm guessing that there may be some individuals who, you know, but maybe it's not, they're not working sort of in that area where students would, maybe they don't have a lot of contact with students, so they would get an exception or something like that. But yeah, I think that they're just trying to set a baseline. Right now, there's very minimal training at all. It's just kind of guidance for training, so this is kind of, I think, taking that first step.
Yeah, and I think like in the schools, the language is also different. It's like social emotional education. They don't call it like mental health. So I wonder like if they can be more inclusive like of everything that's already happening, and be more clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Abigail. And let's see, those could be recommendation for whoever is submitting the motion. Justin?
I support this, but just briefly to your question, Ross, my understanding is that CTA tends to be resistant to any legislation that attempts to tell teachers what they need to be teaching.
I assume that, I just wanted to know if there was
Right.
any official.
Justin, was that also a motion, not the CTA part, the other one?
Motion to make teachers teach certain
No,
things.
no, exactly.
Yeah, I motion to support this bill.
Okay. Ross seconds the motion. And yes, Eleanor.
Okay, I actually wrote a lot on this. I'm sorry.
Please tell me how you think.
So let me see where, I was doing this and I should have typed it, so I'm going to try to go
Take
through
your time.
my writing. All right, so let's see. One, I didn't see what it was going to be taught. So it says, so basically what was going to be taught. And, okay, and then there was, says school employees and pupil, let me see, hold on a second, I'm sorry. So it talks about, I was wondering, and I was trying to actually look up the educational code, and I was wondering as far as I understood, the protected classes, was religion not in here, or?
Maybe for Roseanne, if
Protected classes is in current law, and
religion usually is not,
I'm sure it's in there, or it's, let's see.
Because it's not written in this,
I would think it would fall under like, not ethnic. It's all races, genders, sexual orientations, ethnic and cultural backgrounds, those with disabilities and English learners. So that's what it currently says, but
Yeah.
that's current law, that's not part of this bill proposal,
oh,
to expand upon that.
no. Well, if there was a way, I would say include religion as a recommendation. As far as, so I do have a PPS, and I wanted to know, there was a direct contact with, so it sounds like a lot of it, I'm kind of looking at two different things, because one, it says that the PPS people that are licensed don't have to do it, but from my understanding, a lot of people who are classified or in this certificated positions are PPS, or, you know what I mean? So it was unclear why, and then to say 75%, there's not a whole lot of classified or certificated people, so 75% could be, if you have 4 people, that could be 3 people, right? So I was a little confused on that. Let me see, take mandated, okay. Okay, so 27.9, I have, okay, yeah, it said something about certificate instructors, individuals who obtain and have a certificate to provide they're going to be, sounds like they're going to be teaching. And then 27.3 shall not be a condition of employment in hiring. So, which is kind of odd to say that, because if they're saying you have to have 75%, I'm not clear on why they would have that. 27C, licensed mental health professionals with PPS, this is the one I was saying, so they're pretty much kind of exempt from having to do it. But it almost seems like PPS people should be doing it. because they're the experts. So it seems like they're bringing somebody from the outside. So I don't understand why the PPS licensed person couldn't do that. So,
Thank you, Eleanor, for that. I don't mean to interpret, was that also a recommendation to amend, or it's not
you
linked to any, because we have a motion on the floor, just to understand if that was.
yeah, you know what, for me, it needs more clarification. It's
Okay.
it's vague, and there's a lot of questions I have. So I don't feel comfortable with the way it's said. I mean, I guess it could be amend, or maybe there's those questions I have, how could that come out? So,
Thank-
yeah, like who's gonna teach it, what's gonna be, I mean, I don't think we have any information on what's gonna be taught. I mean, even evidence-based, I know we're usually, good with evidence-based, but I mean, if you think about it, a lot of our people that have come through and gotten PhDs, they're not necessarily minority people. So it's gonna be people generally, I mean, we're what's like 1%? So I'm just saying, I'm just curious what would be coming out, so.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I think, Justin, you wanted to?
Yeah, so actually, some of your questions are answered in the legislation. So in terms of what is going to be taught, in section 51925D, it says, what I think is pretty clear, promoting mental health, wellness, and protective factors, which includes positive development, social and cultural connectedness and supportive relationships, resiliency, problem-solving skills, coping skills, self-esteem, and a positive school and home environment in which pupils feel comfortable. It also, earlier in the document, clarifies exactly what they mean by evidence-based. That's in section 49428.15A. Yeah, and so maybe, Eleanor, you can clarify a little bit more what you're hoping for that isn't addressed in this.
So I'm just wondering who would be teaching it. There's a little bit, for me, the wording is a little ambivalent as far as, like I said, it talks about certificated and what was the other thing? Certificated and classified or something like that. But like I said, a lot of times those are the people that are ready, that I think they should be teaching it. So I don't know who would be coming in,
this
like our
is-
professionals.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Legal counsel.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna point out that in that paragraph above, where, in the introductory paragraph, it does say that it would be from instructors trained in the appropriate courses, who would be doing the training.
Yes.
So Eleanor, the way that I interpreted it, and please tell me if I'm wrong, Roseanne, is I hold a PPS. I'm employed as a school psychologist, and I'm licensed. So I think that, that I would be a person that could do some of that training within my own building. That's how I read it, and is that?
Yeah, that's correct. They didn't want to duplicate the training for people who are already like licensed
Right.
mental health professionals or PPS holders. They already have had the training and are getting the training through
Right.
CE, but
But
it's
I could
meant for.
deliver the training myself.
Right, if
correct?
you have that
If I have the
specific.
expertise on
Yes.
it, that's how I read it.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I also think it's important as, a school person, and with the amount of knowledge and turnover that we get with staff that come in, classified staff are typically, like classroom aides, things like that. Certificated are the, teachers and the more professional that are in the classroom. But a lot of times when we have newer facilitators or teachers that come in, they don't have a lot of knowledge in, in mental health. I know I do a lot of in-servicing with my staff, especially brand new teachers, about mental health and how that relates to education. So I think this is really important. I would like actually to second the motion.
I thought it was already second.
Oh, was it already seconded?
You don't want to third it?
I'll third it, I'll tertiary it, we'll do it fourth and fifth, so there we go.
And we just, yeah.
And I'll just throw in one more thing, because I looked at the most recent analysis that's just fresh, to see if in the most recent, it was for a PROPS committee, if they had addressed the 75% or where that came from, and it does not, address why the CTA is opposing either.
Okay. Abigail?
I'm not sure like who will fulfill on these trainings, right, according to this. But what I, do know is that the school counselors are overwhelmed right now in the school system, and they're taking on a lot of roles. So like if outside parties come and also teach these programs that are evidence-based and effective, it'll just support, right, what we're trying to create here, which is increased mental health, effectiveness of all the school personnel.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, sometimes bills try intentionally not to be too specific about directions, so to leave the freedom to the institutions and their knowledge and expertise to address the proper, individuals that will carry on that responsibility. So I do like the fact that how it's being presented. But anyway, any other comments, folks? So we can go ahead and vote. You have a comment?
No comment.
Oh, I say, you still. No, you too. From the public, is there any other additional comments? We're good? Okay, so I think we can call the vote. Christina? Thank
Yvette
you.
Casares Willis,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasengi,
Yes.
Ross Erlich,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we're moving forward to agenda item number 30, which is discussion and possible action regarding SB 513, Assemblymember Winner, incarcerated persons and mental health. Roseanne, thank you for the intro.
Yeah, so this bill is another attempt to address the mental health crisis, this time for those that are incarcerated. So this particular bill seeks to be able to provide regular mental health therapy to all incarcerated inmates in California, not just those who are classified as severely mentally ill, with the goal of rehabilitation and reduced recidivism. So the requires that the Department of Corrections and Rehab provide mental health treatment in a manner that accomplishes certain things, providing regular and consistent mental health therapy to an inmate seeking it to the greatest extent possible by relying on increasing use of virtual or in-person therapy and contracting with providers out of the department. Offering mental health therapy to the greatest extent possible, even if the prison is restricting in-person therapy. Ensuring an inmate is provided an introductory mental health therapy appointment within 2 weeks of requesting it. Ensuring that the mental health treatment is available to all inmates regardless of their security level, sentence length, or mental health classification, and providing a private space for the therapy to the greatest extent possible. It also, in the bill, provides intent language stating that the mental health therapy refers to 50-minute psychotherapy sessions offered a minimum of 2 times per month. So it's a little bit weird that that's in the intent language and not codified. So that's something I'll bring up in a minute. But the author's intent, for a little bit of background, is they're seeking to provide access for all incarcerated persons. They note that only right now, the CDCR currently only provides therapy to the most severe cases of mental illness. And they have 4 classifications of the most severe. Theirs are the lowest classification. They receive therapy at least once every 90 days. The next level is people whose symptoms impact they have an outpatient program for people whose symptoms impact their ability to function and live in separate housing. They have a program for people who are in acute psychiatric distress for less than 10 days. They're a danger to self or others. And then they have psychiatric inpatient programs. But you have to be classified as pretty severe, having a pretty severe mental health concern in order to get that therapy. They note that around 30,000 incarcerated people fall into one of these classifications, And they technically have access, but their sessions are sometimes as short as 15 minutes, and they're cycled through different therapists, so they don't necessarily see a therapist consistently. The other 67,000 incarcerated persons who are not classified as one of these four things have no access to any mental health care at all, according to the author. So that's the bill. I would just, one comment that I have, which is technical, and I don't think related to supporting or not supporting, but the bill defines a minimum psychotherapy session as 50 minutes, but it doesn't do that in statute. It just does that in intent language, which is actually language that doesn't go into the actual statute code. So I think that's a little bit strange that they did it that way, and if their intent is to make it 50 minutes, then they should state that in the actual in law. Also, for the bill to have its intended effect, it likely should be included, it should list specific license types possibly rather than licensed therapist. But licensed therapist does cover our basic licensees. So anyways, just a couple of minor technical things, but I'll let you guys discuss.
Thank you, Roseanne. I'm gonna, Dr. Walker.
Yeah, I love it. I think she hit the nail right on the head, caught all the little technical hiccups there. So I would make a motion to move it. I appreciate the language and the bill itself, so it's warranted.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I would like to second the motion. Is to support it? Right.
Support, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
My
absolutely.
reason is to also in relations to, I was surprised to also, I mean, I've worked with the prison system here and there, and there is an epidemic in California, suicides in our prison system where people die daily by suicide, and I think this is absolutely necessary. So I'm glad to see this, and I'm looking forward to see it moving forward. And then I see, yes. Chris Jones.
Thank you. Chris Jones, LEP member. Roseanne, does this include all incarcerated youth?
Juvenile.
Juvenile youth.
It's talking about state prison inmates.
So then that would,
So for my information, I don't mean to speak to the bill in that regards, because I do work with general system. There is, I don't want to say a lot, but there is an expectation of mental health. I don't know the frequency, I don't know the criteria. So I wonder if this was just to supply the total absence in the prison system versus.
well, I know that we offer mental health to juvenile incarcerated people. I don't know I'm not using the correct terminology. But yeah, I was just curious as to whether or not if that was included.
It's not clear. It seems to focus on state prison that's under the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So that's pretty general.
Because also the state prisons are regulated by different agency than juvenile system, just to let you know. State prisons under sheriff departments and the others are the
Right.
counties.
Okay. Well, then that negates the second question, because LEPs wouldn't be included in adults anyway that are incarcerated, which was my question about the language specifically with the therapist, because we don't follow, psychologist tends to refer to clinical psychologist and then licensed
correct.
therapist, because the language of the services we provide is psychological counseling. So I don't know if that would have included us.
Interesting.
So I wanted to make, not,
think
if
the-
it's adults who are incarcerated, that would be outside our scope anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and it says licensed therapists. Yeah, there's kind of a question there. If they were to move it into the actual statute, I would probably recommend that they consider listing the license types, but I don't know.
Right. Maybe if Dr. Walker is okay with that, we can definitely ask the staff, just in this case, Roseanne, to maybe investigate and look a little bit the reason behind, if there is, right.
Yeah.
You want to ask if it includes youth, and then if so, include LEPs?
Unless there is a reason why they cannot be there because the bill was not structured
Yeah,
that way.
I think it's, worth exploring. We're kind of to the side here, but it's a good question.
And also, do you want me to ask if they would be willing to specify all of our license types?
Dr. Walker?
It's more concise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wouldn't, I'm
I saw yours.
assuming that you want support, and then that's technical assistance
Right.
on the side, correct? Okay.
So I stand by the motion. I see Ross first and then Eleanor.
Just really quickly, do you know, Roseanne, do you know, is this bill seeking to provide funding? Because presumably, if this bill passes, there's going to be a need for greater mental health treatment professionals. So, you know, if it becomes law and jail or prisons have to supply this, where is the funding and the resources for those personnel?
So the bill is currently in Appropriations Committee, and so Appropriations Committee, I think, has until middle or toward the end of May to be, so in Appropriations Committee, that's where they kind of work out all, if the state has the money to do it, if there's like the desire to do it. So whether or not it gets through Appropriations Committee and what funding is attached to it is what will kind of be found out next.
Will they also then determine if there is funding, how that is to be used as far as like either hiring new personnel or trying to add more? I mean,
I think that they would,
Just,
so when they do a fiscal, the department that's affected usually submits a fiscal impact, and so they will work with the Department of Finance on all of the needs that it'll be kind of worked out at the department level, and that'll kind of, I think, determine the funding.
Usually the appropriation committee, if there is no funds, let's say, and the bill dies because there is no attachment to it. Eleanor?
So I do believe in providing mental health services where, I mean, ideally, it would be nice to provide it for everybody who wanted it or needed it. I know that I don't feel like it's reasonable because there's such a lack of, I mean, we have so much need for licensed people and, you know, I'm just saying I don't think it is, but I wish we could. As far as, so basically I don't feel like we have the workforce to provide for everybody given the stringent parameters that they're setting it forth. I would say, you know, because it says 50 minutes, so we definitely would need to have a larger pool of clinicians to be able to supply that. There's some other questions I have because generally people who they're separated, so people, I did work in the prison, and they're usually separated in pods, so people that are have very severe mental health issues are in a protected pod, and there's like the people who are better, that only get seen like once a month, they're in another pod, and then the general population. A lot of times they do the protection so that they protect the people that have severe mental health issues. So that would be a question, like, would they consider mixing people or, you know, so that would be a question. The other thing is 50-minute meetings. Not everybody wants 50-minute meetings, but I feel like it should be an option if that's somebody that you're going to be working with. But sometimes somebody just wants to meet 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So to force someone to say, you have to stay here. So I feel like maybe there could be, I mean, ideally, like if you can do the whole 50-minute, but, you know, sometimes you're going to base it on like where they're wanting to go. So the other thing is, like I said, keeping it to like a 15-minute, especially working in a prison that you have like 6 doors you have to walk through in order to get to one side and the other. You know, you got to consider like the travel time, you know, where, you know, just everything. There's, you know, documenting, just consulting. So there's other things to do besides just meeting with people. So you have like the team meetings and stuff. So I would just ask that maybe they could relook at that. Maybe it could be somewhat flexible, you know. And then what I would wish to say, and I know that it may not totally be relevant, but I really wish there could be more mentoring, you know, because I mean, people need dignity and respect, you know, and a lot of these people have like burned their bridges, and you know, but regardless, I feel the whole, you know, having him in contact, and you know, I feel is very helpful, and I think it could be I definitely feel like that would be helpful for rehabilitation. So just that extra access. But also, this is just a little, if there's somewhere they can do work with the COs too, just because sometimes that could be part of the mental health issues, but that's another page.
So also, thank you, Leonard, for that. If also invite folks, because when we have a motion on the floor, just also to refer to if we want to do any attainment or encouragement or suggestion, or if we're against it, it's fine too. It's just to have, to refer to the motion, otherwise I don't know if we're creating a new one or not, just for clarity. There was Abigail first and then Kelly, yeah.
Would love to hear from Roseanne regarding what Eleanor said about like it being more flexible and not having to, you have to do a certain amount of time. Because if you put 15, then like the organizations will run with 15.
I don't,
Huh?
can I address that for a second? I'm sorry, Roseanne, it's just, the way I interpret it, this is just a unit of references. It will not force someone to do less or more, because also the professional in the place will determine that individual need based on the time, right? Like Eleanor was right, sometimes you don't need that much or that little. So that, putting in a bill will be, in one way or another, leave out other possibilities. So the flexibility, I think, is there because it will be applied by the professional in questions to assess the necessary time. I agree with Eleanor. When I visit the jail, folks, I mean, it takes you 45 minutes to get to that, but I'm assuming the time starts from the time that you're seeing the people, not the travel time. So I don't think that the way it was posed it's a limiting or,
I agree, and it's for people that request it, it's not a mandate,
Right.
so if somebody requests it, but
not mandatory.
it doesn't say that it doesn't, the bill's not going as far, in fact, it doesn't even put the 50 minutes in the
Right.
bill right now, in the statute text right now, it's just intent.
Yeah.
It's saying 50, I think that's because they're saying, people aren't getting it off, they note in their fact sheet, some people are only getting like 15 minutes, they can't do any more than that, and it's like, I think it's trying to provide more access, but it has to be on their request, so if they don't want it, they don't have to take it necessarily, probably depending on how high they're classified, maybe some do, but if an inmate that's not flagged as one of those, it's just one of those 4 levels, and maybe they want therapy, it's trying to allow them to get it.
That was my understanding. Do you want to answer to that, and then I go to Kelly?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, since you
No, I was,
solicit.
it was something else I was going to ask, so let Kelly
Okay.
go, and it was a different question.
Okay, thank you. In that case, yes, Kelly.
So the budget for CDCR last year was $14.1 billion. So I sort of think they should have been doing this anyway. 14% of the 115,000 inmates in CDCR were previously foster children. Of that population, many of them come from vulnerable populations such as African American, Native American, minority populations. I've worked in the law for nearly 16 years, and I would defer to my my fellow board member, Mr. Ehrlich. I've never met a state prison inmate who could not benefit from mental health therapy. Many of them have histories of significant trauma. So I support the bill with the recommendations suggested. Clarification of licensees, clarification of the time definition of psychotherapy in the bill. I think it's deeply needed. And frankly, for $14.1 billion, one would think that they could provide therapy to the third of the population that they have, which is roughly about, 30,000 people.
I don't want to assume Dr. Walker. I think that what Kelly says was included in your motion as well in terms of recommendation. Am I right to assume that?
Absolutely. Will this
Okay.
come back to us at some point?
Is that again? Oh, the bill?
Yeah, will this bill
It
come back to us?
depends.
It depends on if it keeps moving, if you take a position and the bill stays as is, then no, it wouldn't come back. If it does change and it's still moving by August, when we meet, we might take another position. So it kind of depends on what happens with the bill.
Right. What I love about this board is that I believe we all pay great attention to detail, but we also infer a lot too. And I'm biting my lip over here because, to your point, and my experience with this agency, it is an issue of access. Have they been doing this all along? But have all of the inmates had equitable access to it? Is where we're going here. So it's good for some, but not good for all. So there's so much. There's just so much here that we can't even phantom or get into right now. So that's why I asked the question, would it come back? But for now, we want to keep it moving. We're supporting what we see, right? But I love all the input here. So I would keep the motion on the table the way that it is with the recommendations that have been asked.
So let me read so the motion is support, and then additionally, you would like a technical assistance to ask if it includes youth, and if so, specify it includes LEPs, and then ask the definition of the mental health provider, include all of our license types, is what I have so far.
And we mentioned the timing and all that too, but I don't know if this is the place for us to dig in so deep at that point.
I
at this
don't
point.
know that,
Yeah.
because it's not specifically in the statute about the timing and things like that, I don't know that there
Yeah.
could be technical issues with us requesting that, and they might be
Yeah.
doing that for a reason.
Absolutely.
Also, and in agreement to what you're saying, Dr. Walker, there's also an element of jurisdiction, how far the BBS can go to legislate around things that are not under our jurisdiction. So for instance, the equity aspect of accessibility, unfortunately, it's not under our jurisdiction. So it's a bill that, it's presented to us for the behavioral health related aspect, and
Yeah.
sometimes we're limited.
I mean, you look at the author's intent.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's why I'm supporting this.
And
Yes.
I'll say that some of these bills, we're looking at a lot of bills today, they're kind of a judgment call whether to bring it to the board. It doesn't directly affect our practice acts, but
Yeah.
it affects sort of one of the board's mission statement concerns is access to mental health care. So
Right.
these ones are direct access. Sometimes with those, if the board wants to be supportive, that's great. The agency that's in charge they may or may not welcome feedback on all the details. So to get into that, it's really more, hey, here's a bill that's gonna, increase access for a population. Do we like what it's doing or not?
Right. Thank you, Roseanne. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, did we get a second?
It was my second. You moved the motion, my second, but I believe Eleanor has something else to add.
Yeah, so, like I said, I would agree with the bill, just there's a lot of things that still need to be hashed out. Time constraints, even psychiatrists, because if you're having a lot of people on meds, you're gonna have to consider, hiring more people, so to do that. And at this point, sometimes some people don't even have people locally, they have to go out of state to use a little virtual tablet, so anyway, but that's just a consideration.
Okay, thank you for that, Eleanor. I think the motion stands with my second. Justin, did I see your hands? Oh, no, we're good to go. Christina, we can call the vote. Thank you. Oh, I called for public comments. Did I? I didn't?
You did not.
Can we, I apologize. Our amazing audience today, thank God. We absolutely welcome public comments to this. No, it's not too late. No, are you kidding me? It's too late for me because I'm not catching up with.
Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW, California. I just received an email, so it was very timely. And this is from Eric Hernandez, who is with AFSCME, which is the union that represents correctional workers. And he says, in terms of equitable access, yes, all inmates have access to mental health services, whether severely mentally ill or not.
That's really helpful.
That's not what the author said in their fact sheet.
I know, but that's
That's
kind
the
of a
most
question.
laughable.
just thought I
complaint.
would share that, so.
Very, very timing. Thank you so much. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, seems like we're good to go. And Christina, we are ready for the call for the vote.
Yvette Casares Willis,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. We're moving to item 31. which is this discussion and possible action regarding SB 525, Durazo, minimum wage and healthcare workers. Roseanne.
Yeah, so SB 525 proposes setting a statewide healthcare worker minimum wage of $25 per hour for persons working in covered healthcare employment. Right now, under an existing law, the state minimum wage as of January 2023 is $15 per hour. So this bill, it declares that since California is facing an urgent and immediate shortage of healthcare workers, and the pandemic has worsened that higher wages are needed to attract and retain healthcare workers. So it proposes that as of January 2024, the minimum wage for healthcare be $25 per hour. It provides a very specific definition of a covered healthcare employment. It defines that it is all paid work on the premises of any covered health facility, regardless of the identity of the employer, and all paid work providing health services for any person that owns, controls, or operates a covered healthcare facility, regardless of work location. It defines a covered health facility as a number of different types of entities, including an integrated healthcare delivery system, a general acute care hospital, a licensed psychiatric hospital, a public health jurisdiction, a clinic, a psychology clinic, a psychiatric health facility, a rural health clinic, a physician's group, a county correctional facility, et cetera. So there's some very specific entities named, whereas others are not named, or it's a little bit less clear if they would be covered or not. So that's a little bit kind of ambiguous there. And it defines healthcare services as any services that directly or indirectly supports patient care. So that includes nursing, caregiving, services provided by residents, medical residents, interns, or fellows, housekeeping, groundskeeping, guards, clerical work, etc. So a couple of comments that I have in reading this. The bill lists a number of settings. It does not clearly include all settings which the boards and license registrants work. So it's not exactly clear if nonprofit settings or an independent private practice would be included. It could be possibly included if it was part of a medical group or if they're registered as a clinic, but it's not entirely clear how that would fall, because it kind of would depend on the setup, and if they were a licensed clinic, it's just a little bit ambiguous, like I said. So not all including all settings has potentially positive and negative consequences. It could encourage healthcare workers to choose to work in an included setting over other settings, which is great for those settings and the people working there. However, if there was another included setting, for example, if there was a nonprofit that was not included, and it maybe served underserved communities, it might not be able to afford to compete with the higher pay for providers. So it could cause some difficulties for the non-included providers to attract workers. So there is that particular consideration. Also, in terms of the impacts on associates and trainees, the bill includes services provided by medical residents, interns, or fellows in the definition. The definition could be more specific on whether it includes boards, associates, trainees, and social work interns. They appear to fall under that, but it's not 100% clear. And then including associates and trainees in there could have both positive and negative implications. We've kind of had this discussion in the past on, providing increased pay in some settings and not others. On the positive side, an increased wage could really help associates trying to work for low wages, make it through their graduate program and after. But it also could limit opportunities for others that are trying to make it through if the covered health settings choose to hire fewer therapists because there's increased wage requirements. So it can kind of be both ways. It could be a negative and a positive. I will note SEIU California is the sponsor of this bill. It is in appropriations right now. It has a giant fiscal attached to it. So I expect that if it comes out of fiscal committee, it will likely, possibly in the future, have some amendments due to the broad scope of what is defined as a healthcare worker. But we will see. We don't know that at this time. So we can have a discussion now about that.
Thank you, Roseanne. Sorry, I'm just looking at the bill, and also it's interesting to see how other professions usually are against other profession raising wage when they have nothing to do with it. Like I see a lot of Chamber of Commerce against the bill, which makes me really think. It's like, wow, especially coming out of COVID and the health risk that our workers have experienced. I'm in favor of this bill, but I want to say, even also as a leader of nonprofit environment, so a very small nonprofit organizations, I will not sleep at night if I had to pay my healthcare provider less than $25 an hour. So the narrative around a lack of affordability for smaller entities, I do see there is a challenge, there is a struggle, but it sets the bar of valuing the healthcare providers in your own agency. They're actually the one providing resources, even money in many cases, because of reimbursements, bills, and so forth. I'm in favor of this bill with no other recommendations, so I would like to make a motion, and we open the conversation.
I'll second it.
Second by Dr. Walker. And Justin?
Yeah, I want to add on to this that just preempting what may be some of the conversation, I want to note that there is absolutely no empirical support that increasing wage will notably or significantly decrease jobs. And there is significant support, empirical evidence that increasing minimum wage increases the quality of life of the workers as well as the communities they're in. And so for many, many, many meetings, we have talked about addressing equity gaps and trying to bring people into the profession, trying to value their lives. And so I want to make sure that we are also willing to take concrete steps in supporting that sort of effort.
Thank you, Justin. Any other comments from fellow board members before we, Kelly Ranisinger?
So here's my question on this bill, is that while I absolutely agree with my board member that we need higher wages, my concern is that it's going to drive workers out of rural areas and push them toward the coast, where there are agencies that can pay those higher wages. And so you're going to have that move from those inland rural areas and northern areas down into the NorCal and Southwest. That's my only question, and I'd be curious as to whether there's any evidence of that, and I defer to my board member Haft. That's just my only concern from a rural perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kelly. And now, Ross.
You know, I know that this bill, I'm sure Roseanne knows, it's been a very, very hot topic. It's very much in the news, and I know that there's been lots of articles that have been put out to what Kelly was saying about, I think it was the Murrieta Hospital. There's a number of like medium-sized rural hospitals that are basically saying they're going to have to close if this passes. I think that, you know, these workers, healthcare workers deserve, I mean, I think, you know, raising minimum wage almost across the board personally is a good idea. I don't know, you know, I know there's going to be issues associated with that, so I'm conflicted on that.
Okay, thank you, Ross. Anyone else in the board? Oh, John Sabeck, you're hiding behind the...
I'm not hiding nowhere. With this color hair, I can hide. I would like to agree with my fellow board members. I think the intent of this bill is amazing. I'm not sure if this is actually the correct bill to implement this. I am going to take a support position on it, though, to at least use it to keep the conversation moving.
Justin and then Eleanor. Eleanor first? Okay, Eleanor.
Help me to understand, maybe I'm misunderstanding. So I definitely believe increasing their minimum wage, or, you know, at least going higher for medical, will encourage more people to go into the field. Did they group everybody, like the gardeners, the people that are cleaning, that they would also get the same amount, or am I misunderstanding that?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I would say that would probably just need to be looked at, because, I mean, based on specialty, I would say the pay scale should be relooked at. So, I mean, you know, so if you got someone who's got their PhD and you got someone who's maybe doesn't, I'm just saying maybe it could be, they could look at what is being paid and pay them, what they deserve, but just kind of look at that pay scale better.
It's not 25 for everyone. It
Oh.
starts from 25.
So.
The lowest you can be paid would be $25 going up.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Ross. Any other comments from the board? Oh, yeah, Justin.
In response, and I'm sure Kelly and I will both find peer-reviewed research after this meeting and send it to each other. But to your question about people migrating, I have not seen any research that supports the idea of geographic drift. For decades, economists have said this, but the reality is people have their lives rooted where they live, right? And so they have friends and family and community. And so there tends not to be this drift towards the market, right? People stay where they're at.
I want to say one thing. 1 second is that, and I also, by living in a rural area, Kelly, so I pay attention what you're saying because you're living and experiencing the disparities directly. So to me, that's really important. It's interesting, though, everybody becomes concerned about rural area, not you, only when it doesn't benefit their profits, because we are talking about major agencies doing billions of dollars in profits, not just the small nonprofit or the small healthcare community clinics that you are referring to. And then all of a sudden, those jump in the wagon of, I'm concerned about, migrations because their CEO are making high end their profits. So there is that, and I know that's not your stand, but I just want to, bring some fairness in the conversation because, folks, let's be honest. I mean, this is a political party split in that bill. I mean, I'm just calling it out from the elephant in the room, and has to do with people that don't want to invest in resources and supporting our healthcare worker, and it doesn't matter they're in El Centro or in San Diego and so forth. So it's a very problematic, but to me, if there is a health worker that in California is making less than 25, I'm just imagining how they're going to live or support their loans, student loans, and so forth. So it's very, not doable. But I ended there. Any other comments from the public? Dr. Walker.
Yeah, let me segue from that, because it's worth noting the opposition to this bill is almost 2.5 times as much as those that are supporting it. Given the nature of what we're actually looking at here, there's great opposition to this. So take a look at that.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW California. We are supporting this bill. We think it's important to support our essential workers. Just so you know, in the legislature right now, with the budget process that we're in the middle of, there is a separate conversation about helping hospitals and giving some support to them. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen because the money is tight this year, but there is some focus on that issue also. But we are very supportive of this bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. And Ben?
Ben Caldwell, MFT. I would encourage the board to take a support if amended position. It's certainly a great bill in principle, but to what Roseanne was saying, there are some open questions about in what circumstances the bill would and would not apply. To be sure, there is a fair amount of exploitation that occurs of mental health workers in private practice settings. And so to have this not apply in private practice settings seems odd. And then when it comes to some of those nonprofit entities that are currently paying less than $25 an hour, it would be nice to see some sort of protection in the bill to ensure that the bill doesn't lead those places to then reclassify their employees as volunteers and pay them zero instead of paying them, an inadequate amount. So certainly good in principle, just I think some clarification to do to ensure that it really has the intended effect. Thank you.
Ben, can I just add something around the nonprofit sector because I think I can speak to it. Behavioral health for nonprofit sectors, especially in California, is mostly supported by state funds and public grants, like behavioral health that goes through the county. When I do apply for human resources for behavioral health, I need to, or any other medical related services, I need to refer to what the pay structure is in California. So, so it's not funds I raise for that. Those are usually, so that's why the element of nonprofit, while I agree, I appreciate the concern, usually doesn't happen the way that you describe it, because there is a source of income comes from the state that you can justify that that's the cost of producing or delivering services, which has been adjusted yearly after year based on the increase of quality of cost of life and so forth. So just for a little bit of, sometimes our nonprofits are used to hold down instead of look up, into what's fair to be given.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I would say that much of what I'm commenting on here refers to nonprofits that are private nonprofit clinics. We have this issue in LA County that's been in front of the board before, of clinics that are charging trainees and associates to work there, which is it's a separate issue policy-wise. But when you're talking about agencies like that rather than getting the kind of funding streams that you're talking about, they rely largely on small donors or small fees that clients pay. It's just a different framework for hiring, for employment, for delivering services, and there is some concern that in those kinds of settings, we might see unintended consequences. But I think it's just a difference in context.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thanks. Any other comments? And I believe we still have a standing motion and a second. Just as a reminder, any members from the public that would like to share any other later emails? Okay, we're good to go. I think Eleanor, I apologize.
Can you repeat the motion?
Yes.
Was it including amended or no?
There was a suggestion from Ben to do including amended. I do not support that, but I don't know if Dr. Walker has proposed. Okay, so we stay, the motions approving the bill as it is, with the recommendations to staff to investigate around.
The motion that I have is just support.
Support. Yeah, there are no recommendations. That was another bill. So that stands. So that's what we're voting on. Christina, thank you.
Yvette Casares Willis,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Can you come back to me?
Ross Ehrlich,
Abstain.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
and Kelly Ranasinghe.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. We're moving to agenda item 32. Give me a second. This is discussion and possible action regarding SB 544, Laird, Begley, Keene, Open Meeting Act, teleconferencing. Thank you, Roseanne.
Yes, and just a reminder that this bill was updated after the board materials were released.
Yeah.
So we should be looking at the April 27th, 2023 version. That's the version we'll be discussing today. So this bill is a very similar version of a bill that they attempted to run last year, but was unsuccessful. So they are running a different one because the exceptions on the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that were due to COVID are set to end on July 1st. So this bill is trying to modernize the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act to better accommodate teleconferencing. Under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act currently, it requires that the actions and deliberations of all state agencies be conducted openly. It requires, the law requires boards under DCA to meet at least 2 times each calendar year, and boards must meet at least once each calendar year in Northern California and once in Southern California in order to facilitate participation by the public. It requires that all meetings of a state body be open to the public and all persons permitted to attend, with certain exceptions like closed session for discussions about disciplinary action or legal considerations, things like that. The law does not prohibit a state body from holding an open or closed meeting by teleconference, but certain specific requirements have to be met. There has to be an open teleconference meeting that's audible to the public at the locations specified in the meeting notice. Requires the state body must post agendas at all teleconference locations and identify each teleconference location in the notice and agenda of the meeting and make each teleconference location accessible to the public. So that means if a board member is participating via a teleconference from their home, the home address has to be posted and the public has to be allowed in. Or if they're conducting the meeting from Starbucks, that location has to be, so Sabina would not approve of that, but if they were at Starbucks, it would have to be posted there and everybody would have to be able to attend at Starbucks, in order. So that's what the Bagley-Keene says now. It's somewhat outdated based on the technology that we started using during COVID, however. The law currently also requires at least one member of the state body to be physically present at the location specified in the notice of the meeting. A state body has to provide notice at least 10 days prior to the meeting and include an agenda. But then all of this was temporarily waived during the COVID state of emergency, so until July 1, 2023. So we are coming up on that, and so we are about to revert back to the old law about teleconferencing unless a bill is run to change that in law. And this bill does not have an urgency clause. So as it's written right now, if it were to pass and go into effect, it would be January 1, 2024. So that's where we're at right now. So under this bill, it makes some modifications to try to accommodate some of the changes we saw during COVID and take advantage of some of those abilities to increase access. The bill removes the requirement that a state body conducting meetings by teleconference must post agendas at all teleconference locations. It removes the requirement to identify each teleconference location in the meeting notice, and it removes the requirement to make each teleconference location accessible to the public. So a board member attending from their home would not have to let everybody into their house, which can raise ADA issues because there's those considerations.
To say the least.
Yeah. The bill requires the board to provide a means for the public to remotely hear audio of a meeting, remotely observe the meeting, or attend the meeting by providing a phone number, website, and physical address for at least one site on the posted agenda. If available, this must include access equivalent to the access a member of the state body participating remotely would have. So the public's access would be equivalent to like what a board member got. The telephone, website, and physical address must be specified in the meeting notice. This agenda must provide an opportunity for members to address the state body directly. And instead of requiring at least one member of the state body to be physically present at the location specified in the notice, it amends the law to require at least one member or staff person of the state body be physically present at the location specified in the agenda as the meeting notice. It provides that the location of each member participating does not need to be provided. And it states that members of the public are entitled to exercise their right to directly address the state body during the meeting without having to submit public comments prior to the meeting or in writing. The bill also provides that if remote participation fails, that the meeting must end and the state body needs to provide notice that the meeting ended. And it provides that if a state body is holding the meeting through teleconference, it needs to implement a procedure to receive and resolve reasonable modification or accommodation requests in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and advertise the procedure that's in place. And then finally, the bill provides that if a state body member attending a meeting by teleconference from a remote location, if they're attending from a remote location, that member must disclose if there's any other individuals age 18 or older in the room with them and the general nature of the relationship. So those are kind of some of the things that they're trying to do to improve the Open Meeting Act so it's a little bit more feasible to have teleconference meetings once the COVID emergency order ends for Bagley-Keene. In terms of what this board used to do, prior to the pandemic, the board occasionally held meetings via teleconference, but most meetings were held in person. So teleconference meetings at the time, because of the technology was different, it was a telephone conference call line rather than a video platform, but now we have WebEx that we're able to use. And so that kind of we've found has increased public access greatly for our stakeholders. So I think that's pretty much covers it. I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Roseanne. And are there any questions or observation from the board? Otherwise, I see Leah already there. And we can go with Leah first and then come back to the board. It's okay too. Thank you,
Just
Dr.
really
Brew.
quickly, this is a real problem because in 2020, somebody showed up at my office at one of these meetings, and it was kind of awkward. So I urge you, for your own sake, in case we all get sheltered in place again, to vote yes on this.
I have to say, I remember Dr. Brew, actually, we were on the board together prior to the pandemic, and we were doing teleconferencing, and I was doing it from my office, and it was just, obviously publishing the public, and in a few cases, because we didn't know, we made the mistake with the zip codes, we had to cancel the meeting because some of us entered the wrong zip code or their own offices, and we had to cancel the meeting at the last minute. So it was quite problematic. So I'm actually happy to see that. But anyway, John Savick, then Chris.
I just wanted to check in with Steve to hear some expertise. In your reading of the bill, are you noticing any implementation problems that would be prohibitive for us to actually proceed with this?
No.
Good question. Chris John.
And I think I know the answer to this, but just want a clarification. This also includes committee meetings,
Yes.
not just
Yes.
not just the
All
board
meetings.
full. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Comment from the public again.
Good afternoon, Kristen Roscoe from the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. We definitely support the board's ability to meet virtually for two primary reasons. First and foremost is the diversity of opinions in being able to draw from across California. People have families and work, and travel to physical locations is often prohibited. And also, there's a financial cost. That's the second matter. We had a trainee who was present earlier. That was a single trainee of how many trainees across the state. So that is just one thing where we certainly support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Sure, our legal counsel.
I just have to say, during when we started the WebEx, I am also counsel to other boards, and we saw the most public participation through our WebEx platform. Hundreds of people would show up to other board meetings, which we'd never seen before. Also, think about the cost savings for many boards. Maybe not such a problem for this board, but I've had other clients who've had to actually cancel meetings because they didn't have enough money to bring their members to a board meeting. So they would have to push off their meetings until the next fiscal year. So a lot of these changes and amendments are really important for all of our boards and bureaus.
Thank you. You don't get to vote though. Anyway, any other comments from board members? Kelly,
I support this, not just for personal reasons, but also because it really does increase the ability of rural members of boards to participate in these meetings. For those of us up in Northern California or Southeastern California, it's a lot easier. For instance, I drove 4.5 hours to get here through the Salton Sea, which is a fun drive, but it makes it a lot easier.
Thank you for that motion, Kelly. Was that motion? So Kelly's moving a motion, Kelly Ranasinghe, and yes, and Chris Jones is second.
The motion was just with support.
To support the bill, yes. Thanks for clarifying, Roseanne.
Was there a second?
Yes, we have a second. So motions on the floor. Last call for any additional comments from the board. Any additional comments from our audience? We're good to vote. Christina, thank you.
Yvette Caceres-Willis.
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich.
Yes.
John Sovek.
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
Chris Jones.
Yes.
Wendy Strack.
Yes.
Susan Friedman.
Yes.
Justin Huff.
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have a little more work to do, but we do need a break, 10 minutes break, and we resume at 2:40. Yes, Roseanne, hold on.
For the next item, 766, there were some supplemental materials, 2 supplemental letters. They've been posted on the website as attachments to item 33, but if anybody did not receive one and wants to, I either have copies or there's copies outside the front door.
Wonderful, thanks for that. So we'll resume at 2:40. We are going public with the record at the moment. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming back in. Resuming our public portion of our meeting is 2:42, May 5th, 2022. We're at 23. We're in Orange County, California. Board of Behavioral Science. My name is Max Disposti, Board Chair, and we are resuming on agenda item number 33, and which is the discussion and possible action regarding SB 766, Ekman on social workers. Thank you, Roseanne.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks, Max. And I just, as I mentioned before we went to the break, the board has received 2 letters that the stakeholders have requested be included as supplemental materials. One letter from the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, one from the California Association for Licensed Professional Clinical Counselors. Those have been incorporated into the public record on the website, and they are also provided outside of the front door, or I have them if anybody wants them. So just noting that, we can move on to the bill. This bill would limit the use of the title social worker to only those who hold a degree from an accredited school of social work. So right now, the law sets forth the Clinical Social Worker Practice Act, and only persons that are issued a license by the board can call themselves licensed clinical social workers or engage in the practice of clinical social work. The existing law also defines the term accredited school of social work as a school that is accredited by the Commission on Accreditation of the Council of Social Work Education. A Board's Practice Act has a definition of the practice of clinical social work, and it states what various applications of social work methods include. It also states that certain clinical social workers licensing requirements do not apply to an unlicensed or registered employer volunteer working in certain exempt settings, and it defines exempt settings as a government entity, a school, college, or university, or an institution that is both nonprofit and charitable. And finally, current law provides that a violation of the Clinical Social Work Practice Act is a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment in county jail not exceeding 6 months or by a fine of up to $1,000 or both. So this bill does things for individuals, and it also imposes certain requirements on employers. So I'm going to start with individuals first. For individuals, it only permits a person to represent themselves as a social worker if they have a degree from an accredited school of social work as defined in the Board's Practice Act. It provides that the use of any other healthcare or social service title is not limited by the law. It provides that before January 1, 2029, the restrictions do not apply to an individual classified by their employer as a social worker if that classification was held prior to January 1st, 2024. So those are the requirements it places on individuals. And then for employers, it provides that an employer or principal shall not represent their employee or agent as a social worker unless they have a degree from an accredited school of social work. It provides that these employers must represent their employees with a different title than social worker if they do not have the correct degree, and they can't use any other term that implies they possess a degree from an accredited school of social work. And it proposes the same timeline. It must be, there's an exemption period until January 1, 2029. The bill applies the title protection of social worker to all individuals, even those who are employed in a exempt setting. And it also provides that the use of the title social worker without the appropriate degree is an unfair business practice, to county jail for up to 6 months and/or a fine of up to $1,000. And it states that in addition to the other allowable causes of action, the board may bring an action for an injunction or other appropriate relief restraining a person's conduct for a violation before the Superior Court. So the author's office is stating in their fact sheet for the bill that there are 25 accredited colleges and universities that offer professional social work degrees, and they have about 9,000 students currently in the pipeline, and that many private organizations and public agencies, such as Child Welfare and Adult Protective Services, classify caseworkers as social workers, which leads the public to believe that they are receiving services from a professional social worker, somebody with a degree from an accredited school of social work. They state that the bill protects the public from misrepresentation by ensuring only social workers with the accredited degree have the right to represent themselves as social workers. The sponsor states that in addition to a master's of social work degrees, an accredited degree could also be a bachelor's of social work, a doctorate of social work, or a PhD of social work. The bill contains a 5-year transition period to 2029, and this is being done in order to ensure a smooth transition to allow employers and affected workers time to adjust the title requirements, because a lot of them are government agencies that are using the social work title. The bill is a title act. It is not a practice act like the board's practice acts that are in its law. A little bit of a note about the anticipated role of the board. The bill appears to give the board the authority to enforce title protection, but it's optional. They may do this enforcement action rather than they shall do an enforcement action. So as written, the board allows but does not require any enforcement action of the social work title by the board. In terms of estimating a fiscal impact, the bill could be impactful to the board if there is a large number of violations and the board chooses to pursue them. It's really unknown how many violations that we would see. The sponsors of the bill estimated when we asked them that there would be approximately 20 to 30 violations per year, but that most agencies will comply and that the 5-year grace period will give them time to do so. The Attorney General's office estimates that the cost to the board for their office to bring an injunction, if the board were to go that route, would be approximately $5,000 to $10,000 per case. And so the board would likely need we're thinking probably a half-time analyst position in order to review complaints, work with agencies for compliance and education, and possibly some costs, if $5,000 to $10,000 per case, if we went as far as an injunction against somebody. There was previous legislation that the board had in the past taken a position on that was somewhat similar to this. It was AB 252 by authors Yamada and Eggman in 2013. Similarly proposed limiting the use of social work title for those who hold a degree. AB 252 died in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. The board had taken at that time a support if amended position on AB 252, but had requested some amendments. Some of those amendments was that language to clarify that it would be the employer subject to discipline because the employer is the one that would most likely choose the job title. And then the board at the time had requested it be removed from the enforcement element of the bill due to having limited enforcement resources. So in terms of support and opposition, the support and opposition has changed a little bit since we printed this sheet. So I'm going to read out the support and opposition. The support, of course, is the sponsor, the National Association of Social Workers California chapter, the Bay Area Association of Black Social Workers, the California Association of School Social Workers, Lincoln Families, Society for Social Work Leaders in Healthcare, and an organization called 23 Strong. And then the opposition, we have a couple of opposed unless amended letters, one from CAMPS and one from CalPIC, and then also the County Welfare Directors Association of California had provided in the bill analysis, they had said they were opposed due to it being difficult to recruit staff, classifying positions is costly and time-consuming, and then a lack of degreed social work protections were some of the factors that they named. So with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Actually, I would like to go the opposite way this time since I read the letter of our associations. I would like to hear from you if you're willing to share, and so we can start the conversation from the opposition. Thank you.
From the opposition or
Go ahead. You know what I mean. From the public. Sorry.
Yeah, nice introduction
I changed-
there. Thank you.
I'm in different boards, so.
So Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. We are the sponsor of this bill. As you probably all know, we represent social workers with a degree in social work from an accredited school of social work. We're the largest social work association in the world with 110,000 members nationally and 56 chapters. Our mission is we strive to advance the quality of social work practice and to promote the unity and recognition of the profession. Title protection for social workers has been a priority for NASW for many years, which is why we're sponsoring this bill. For new members of this board, you may know this already, but the social work profession is a little different than a lot of the other professions regulated by this board because students who go into social work school, some do go in with the intention to become licensed clinical social workers, but many do not. I mean, social workers work in many places, and they may or may not have their license if they're child welfare services, but they don't need to. Same with, adult protective services. Many work with nonprofits, with the homeless association, homeless organizations, or they might do what's called macro social work, which is working in public policy, trying to get that advanced at that macro level. So, just wanted to give you the breadth of the profession. The issue here really for us is, we want our title to be used correctly. So we are really concerned with the misuse of the title. You may hear that social worker is a common term, and that's exactly the problem. I mean, the opposition points this out, but we think that is the problem, that it has become a common term, and this is happened over a number of years, but may partially be due to unfunded and underfunded federal mandates, such as the California Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which created a great need for caseworkers or case managers. So, at that time, the counties especially started using the social work title for people who didn't have that degree in social work. But the profession of social work has existed for over 100 years, and as you know, a profession dictates who we see as our members, so who is a social worker. And we told you our definition, those with a degree in social work. Plus, there are common markers of a profession. A profession is commonly defined as a vocation founded upon specialized educational training. The main milestones which mark an occupation being identified as a profession are that it is a full-time occupation, the first training school has been established, the first university school has been established, the first local association has been established, and the first national association has been established. In addition, the profession has established and follows a code of professional ethics. The social work profession meets all of these criteria, and California currently has 25 accredited CSU, UC, and private programs throughout the states. Like other professions with title protections, such as realtors, nurses, physical therapists, and doctors, social work is a profession and should be recognized as such. Secondly, without title protection for social workers, we believe both consumers and the profession are harmed. And as this is a consumer protection board, that is, very much on the top of our minds. And we believe a consumer should be confident that the social worker that is working with them is fully trained and educated in social work. This bill will protect consumers from misrepresentation by guaranteeing that their social worker has that training and education. And confusion over a title can be quite serious because social workers impact the lives of families and children in dramatic ways. And I do want to add here too, so when I said the title of social work is given commonly, I think the other professional associations will talk about their professions, but it also could be someone who has a bachelor's in sociology or a bachelor's in anything. So we do think that confusion over a title can be quite serious because social workers impact the lives of families and children in dramatic ways. Social workers are specifically educated and trained to intervene in life-threatening situations such as the abuse of a child or protecting the elderly and disabled. In addition, when complaints are made against social workers to program administrators, policymakers, and the media, there is no mechanism to distinguish between those who have attained the degree and title from those who have not, and this is detrimental to the public and to the profession. Lastly, restricting the title of social worker to degreed social workers elevates and values the profession and the years of study spent getting a social work education. Social workers are essential to health, safety, and well-being and should be uplifted and valued for their contributions to our society. To address concerns from our friends in opposition at this meeting, it is outlined in one of those letters that the bill is trying to define or trademark a common term. Since social workers is used as a common job title, and this goes back to what I said, we believe this argument makes our case for why this bill is needed and why we are so intent on reclaiming our title. Secondly, we do believe there is consumer harm, which I outlined previously. While I do grant that all consumers are knowledgeable about the social work profession, it is a profession with a dedicated degree and extensive internship hours in order to be a social worker. And we do believe consumers should have that assurance. Thirdly, another concern is that this bill will result in job losses. We absolutely do not see that as being an outcome of this bill. This is a title protection bill only. It's about what you could call people. It's not an employment act. It's not telling anybody that you can only hire degreed social workers. It doesn't have that anywhere in there. It's also not a practice act saying that only social workers can do this type of work. It's only about what you call people. The most likely way for employers to conform to this bill is to go to generic titles, such as mental health therapist, child welfare worker, et cetera. And some counties do actually already go to like child welfare worker, for example. And while this is maybe not our first choice for how this bill would be implemented, we do see it as an acceptable choice because we are very concerned about our title just being used inappropriately. The bill also has that 5-year grace period for those already given the social work title, which gives employers ample time to change titles for their jobs. Because of the mental health workforce shortage, employers will comply in a way that will enable them to retain their employees. If other professions such as LMFTs and LPCCs are doing their job, and I assume they're doing a good job, the employer will comply to the law in a way that will enable them to retain their employees. We are introducing this bill solely to reclaim the title of our profession. It is important to recognize the distinct aspects of social work and our person and the environment perspective. And then also because not all social workers become LCSWs, it is important for other social work graduates to take control of a title we see as ours. Thank you.
Wow, Rebecca, I can tell you were waiting for that. But thank you, really very much appreciate. I also appreciate the fact that you addressed some of the concern, but obviously would like to give space to our partners as well. Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Victor Manalo. I am the board president of the National Association of Social Workers California chapter. And I'm here obviously in support of this particular bill. And I am, as Becca alluded to, I am actually one of the social workers that does not have a license in clinical social work. Just to let you know that there are social workers out there that do practice in areas that is not involved with one-on-one clinical therapeutic type of work. And that was a choice that I made. And that is part of what I do as a professor, a retired associate professor at California State University, Los Angeles, in the School of Social Work. I've been teaching there since 1999. Yes, I started when I was very young. Thank you very much. And, but the students, one thing that strikes me about my students, and it's at Cal State LA, we teach a lot of students who are the first in their families to go to college, the first in their families to seek higher education, and they want to be social workers. And many of them have lived in communities and have grown up being victimized in their communities by the very institutions which we have all been a part of to create to help them and to empower them and to save them. And yet, despite the experiences that they've had in their communities, they still want to be social workers. And I think the draw for the profession of social work is many of the things already that Rebecca mentioned. But the one thing that we talk about a lot in our classes is the code of ethics. And one of our primary values as social work professionals is social justice. And I think that's why many of my students want to pursue social work. And that's why many of us are not clinicians, because we feel that we have a part to play in trying to address the social injustices of our communities and our neighborhoods and our society and our world through other means and working in other arenas. So as Becca mentioned, we social workers are all over the place. I always tell my students, where you find a need, there's a social worker. We're in schools, we're in elementary schools, we're in the streets working with people who are unsheltered, we're working with those who are undocumented, we're working with all sorts of people that need assistance and help. And I urge all of you to support this bill, because it really means a lot to my students to get this degree. It takes I'm privileged. I understand that, I have privilege that I did not have to work when I was getting my degree, any of my degrees, especially my undergraduate degree. I did not have to work. I was fortunate. When I got my master's degree, I had to work, but I was luckily I didn't have to work a full-time job. But my students, whether they're undergraduate students in social work or they're graduate students in social work, they're working. They're working full-time jobs. And the students that I described to you, they're not just working full-time jobs to pay to go to school, but they're taking care of families, they're taking care of older parents. They are diverse, as diverse can be, and those are the types of people that we need in our profession. And for them to graduate, put all this work of internship hours and classes and years of their time in studying and taking tests and writing papers and all this stuff, for them to go out into the field and get a job as a social worker, knowing that there may be a colleague sitting next to them who has the same title but didn't go through the same level of intensive study and internship and preparation that they did, they would tell me that is a barrier to becoming a social worker. They will tell me that is a barrier to becoming a social worker, because if they wanted to do that same type of work, they didn't have to go through all the stress and strain of having to get an education and a social work degree. I value my degrees in social work. I know that my students do, and they just want to be recognized for the work and the effort that they have put in to become a social work professional. So I urge you to support this bill on behalf of my students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you again, and very welcome. Absolutely, come forward.
Thank you so much. Kristen Roscoe from the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. As Roseanne noted, and hopefully you have in your materials, we did submit a letter in opposition. Given the limited time frame here, I just want to highlight our three primary concerns. And just starting off, first and foremost, is we, of course, value the very important work done by social workers. And to that end, and in furtherance of trying to get a better understanding as to the work of our member social workers across the state. We did a survey of our membership, and we're still getting responses, but to date, we've gotten nearly 1,000 responses from our MFT members who have held and do hold social worker titles. And these are not only in population centers such as LA and San Diego, but these are, an oncology social worker at a hospital in Ventura County, or a supervising social worker at a nonprofit foster agency in Butte County. To be clear, what the impact here in terms of possible job loss for these social workers across the state is that in 7 months from now, less than 7 months at this point in time, they could, have colleagues who leave jobs, as everyone does, and that position would be closed to someone who may not have that underlying social worker degree, but could do the job if they were an MFT or PCC. And to that end, that gets to our second primary concern, which I think has been raised previously here, is the pandemic did a number on the mental health of Californians everywhere. There's already a strong need for care and a lack of access to care. And yes, while there is a drawn-out time frame for those individuals already in social work positions, as time progresses and as people leave jobs, those doors will be closing, lessening the ability for those who need the care most to access that type of care. And third, our concern is, as my colleague noted, the term social worker is a very common turn of phrase. Just as therapist or counselor is, it's not unique to social workers. There are family therapists jobs in El Dorado County that are open to LCSWs and LMFTs. There's a mental health counselor job that's open to LCSWs, LMFTs, and psychologists in Napa County. And to that end, BBS as the regulatory body, as the consumer protection body, we struggle to understand the consumer protection that comes from criminalizing someone holding a position in 7 months from now who is providing social work care but doesn't necessarily have that underlying degree. And that is of course, a great concern to us. And we very much empathize with the cultural problems underlying the bill as the sponsors have brought forward. And we are very much happy to support our colleagues in addressing those cultural concerns, of course. But to that end, we really appreciate the board's thoughtful consideration of this bill. And as written, we strongly encourage the board to vote to oppose unless amended, to exclude LMFTs and LPCCs from the bill, or in the alternative, take no position. I really appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time as well. And continuing from the audience is okay, Dr. Brew?
Thank you. I just want to emphasize, as some of the points that were put forward about social work being unique. In some ways, of course, it's unique. In other ways, it's not. For example, a social justice mandate and advocacy is an ethical obligation and part of our accreditation standards in the profession of counseling. Additionally, our students also do 60 units, many of them working full-time, as I did through my undergraduate, my master's degree, and my doctorate degree. Work full-time the whole way through, never any debt there. And they all have internships as well, so it weakens that particular argument. I'm also hesitant to tell employers who they can and can't hire and who is not qualified to do a particular position, because that sets up a precedent for other types of professions. And then while 5 years might seem like adequate time for particularly county and state agencies to change job titles, it's apparently not. The bill for the LPCC, which I helped bring to fruition back in 2009, it passed in 2009. The first licensees came out in 2012. Our organization, CalPIC, worked very hard. I'm not speaking as a representative for them right now, I'm just a member now. But we worked very hard to get the LPCC acknowledged for different county agencies. And I haven't looked this year, but last year, in doing a site visit for another program review, they were saying that their students were unable to work in certain counties because they still don't allow LPCC to be added into their database. They say it's too costly or too labor intensive to change the title of a particular position, and or to even put that the LPCC is one qualified person in addition to like LMFT and LCSW. So apparently for some counties, it's still, it's been 11 years and they haven't done it yet, and we're still fighting for that. And then finally, because this also addresses undergraduate level education for social workers, I just wonder how that would affect the BBS in terms of somebody asking the BBS. I know they're not required, but if somebody brings it forth at undergraduate level work, because the BBS doesn't regulate undergraduate level work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brew. Wow. Okay, are there any other comments from the audience? You would like to, you're allowed before we start, yes. Okay. I'm sure my colleagues won't mind, so we have more information.
I just want to, point out a few other things. As I said, it's a Title Act only. It's not a practice act. It's not telling, if this bill passes, it doesn't mean that you can't still employ LMFTs, LPCCs into this job. So it definitely doesn't address that. I think the first speaker talked about how if someone, and then of course we have that 5-year grace period, but if somebody leaves their job and they're saying that job wouldn't be open to other LMFTs once it's vacant, these jobs are filled by different professions right now because the job specifications allow that. Those job specifications aren't going to change. Those job specifications will still allow these people to be hired into these positions. And like I said, I do think most counties will go to generic titles, will probably be the way that they comply with this bill. Also a little bit about the cost. Reclassification studies are needed when you are changing the requirements for a job. Who's able to do this and who is not able to do this. And we did a survey and looked at counties and to see what their specifications were for their social work jobs, and almost all of them were open to other professions. So we don't believe those counties will have to go to reclassification studies. There were only 2 counties we found that would need to do that, and it would just be a title change only. So I don't know if you want to address anything else, but that's like the main comeback to that. I do want to say too that we are working and talking to the opposition. We obviously work together on a lot of bills, and we came up here and we're co-sponsoring 2 bills today. There was that amendment to exclude LPCCs and LMFTs from the bill. We felt that was going a step too far. We felt that we don't want to have another AB5 situation where everybody's trying to get out of this bill, county workers next. But we had, initially we drafted a set of amendments that would be in the intent language to clarify everything that I just said. It's a Title Act, it's not a Practice Act, it's not an Employment Act, and that wasn't sufficient, which is fine. But I just hope we could find something. But that, I want to let you know that we're trying to bargain in good faith. We're trying to figure out something that will make everybody happy. It's, a challenge, but, it's a commitment that we're making.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate the clarifications even in relations to the approve if modified, because I was curious to know what was the intake in regards to the exclusions of MFTs. And great. It's nice to hear that you're trying to work it out. Is that the truth?
It is, of course. Yeah,
okay, we can hear from you, and then we move to the board after your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kristen Roscoe from Campt again. I just wanted to highlight one point of clarification. So to be clear that this job title is not confined to county work alone. This is coming from, foster homes, this is across the spectrum of where mental health care is provided in this state. And so just one example of, a title change that we've uncovered. Again, unfortunately, we've only had a few weeks of looking into how expansive this bill could be in terms of its implications for our members. But we had one medium-sized agency here in Orange County that told us that it took them nearly 3 years to make agency-wide title changes. And that was due to certain county requirements, funding sources, policies, and procedures. So if you extrapolate that across all of California's 58 states, or counties rather, excuse me, you can kind of have a better understanding as to the larger issues at hand. Thank you again.
Thank you again, and then we are moving to the board. If there are any questions, comments, observations, I start from Kelly on my right, then John Savick, then Justin. We'll go that way, and then we'll continue. Yes?
So this bill is inconsistent with existing statutory law. You cannot legislate polysemia, but first of all, CAPTA refers to guardian ad litem, and second of all, the term social worker as consistent with juvenile probation officer is used in section 16504, 215, 328, 329, the JV 210 form, which is put out by the Judicial Council, section 5328.04, section 16513.5, section 360B, section 360C. So move this bill forward, you throw the entire dependency statutory scheme into utter chaos. Also, the definition of social worker already occurs. It's under Title V, Section 3051.13, California Code of Regulations, which actually is parallel to the definition propounded by NASW today. So why is NASW bringing this forward as the BBS being sort of the enforcement or brand recognition arm of social workers? Because it really has nothing to do with consumer protection. And lastly, I would just say this. I was picked up by my social worker. I'm the social worker from DSS. The social worker provided reunification services. My child's social worker gave me a toy for Christmas. All of those sentences are consistent with child welfare semantics. Social worker is what's called a polysemous term. It means that one term has multiple definitions in different contexts. It's not brand recognition. Unfortunately, the board as a government entity cannot engage in brand enforcement. CAMPT is entirely correct in this line. So I think we should oppose. In fact, I'd move to oppose.
Okay, Kelly, so we have a motion to oppose to the bill? That's, did I hear clear? Okay. Then I have John Savick. Well, as we go, we can move for a second, it's not a problem, yeah.
Just a question for Ms. Gonzalez. Is NASW California recommending this passing as a clean bill with no amendments or recommendations?
Today of the board? I mean, we would like that. I mean, we're like I said, we're still going to be working on the bill. If we have amendments down the line, we'll see how they turn out. But at this point, there aren't any amendments at the table. So we would like it to be, passed as is. But you're always welcome to do what you've done today, which is either, hopefully support with some recommendations or some thoughts or proposed amendments. I mean, you're perfectly willing to do that. But of course, our hope is that the board will just support it outright.
So the bill we are seeing today clearly represents the intentions and hopes of NASW California.
Which is the Title Act only, yes.
Got it.
Yes.
That was it, John Savick, and then I believe next was
Justin Huff. I'm also conflicted about whether or not this is in the purview of the BBS, because we don't look at social workers broadly. We look at LCSWs, which are clearly defined. So maybe some additional clarification would help from anybody in the room, help.
No, that's okay,
Because
yeah.
it doesn't seem clear that this would be for us to be looking at. It does, if it is, it does seem like a consumer protection issue that if I'm a parent and I need a social worker, I
Right.
want to know what that means when I see a social worker.
Right. That's, I
A
think that's.
licensed one.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. So I said is the intent of our bill was to, protect our title and say what a social worker is. We don't, kind of agnostic on the BBS being the enforcer. That's the way the bill is written now, but if we can figure out another appropriate agency, that would be great too. We do have title protection in 41 other states, but in a lot of that states, they don't have a combined board like we do. And they also might have multi-tier licensure. So we are open to the enforcement mechanisms as, going forward.
Okay, thank you again, Rebecca. I believe I saw Eleanor. Did I see that hands? And then Ortega. Yes. Eleanor? Was she? Okay. You raise your hand.
Thank you. So I was not a social worker for my bachelor's, but I did social work for my master's, and I am licensed clinical social worker. So I have a little different perspective in that way. I would say I have supervised people from other fields, and I have supervised social workers in the university. I've also taken courses from other disciplines, and my master's was in social work. So I have a perspective on that. Definitely there is an accreditation and very specific guidelines that are followed by social workers, and different types of trainings and even, requirements as far as some of the internships. And so, like I said, even supervising people from different disciplines that are master level. I would like to, I'm sorry, I'm looking through my scratch. So anyway, what I was going to say is that I think it is important. I can think far back. It's, just saying you're a social worker, it's almost like, this is my name and this is what I do versus just generalizing. I feel I have worked alongside other people in child welfare that definitely can do the job. So I would almost put the burden on the agencies, and it's been a long time coming where it should, I believe it should have been, it should be specified, and like I said, whether it be like healthcare professional practitioner, caseworker, there's plenty of words that can be used. Let me see. I don't agree with the strict fines or criminalizing. That sounds excessive, and people are all trying to help. Because I think we could all, we all work together, and I think we need more of us. I wouldn't like to see those limits, but I think asking to just be called your name is, I don't feel like that's a big thing. I feel it is a big thing, but like I said, it's been a long time coming. So if you could just say, hey, this is our profession, this is what we do, this is our guidelines, it's very, very specific. So, and maybe even extending the timelines, because we've been so long that we've had that, even 10 years. Maybe it's a work in progress. So, we don't want to see people losing their jobs or all that, but at least get the ball rolling, so.
Just for clarity, and then I go to you, Ortega, because there is an attempted motion, just as a reminder, for sake of fairness, from Kelly Ranasinghe. There is a proposed motion to oppose to the bill. I just want a reminder, just in the conversation, it can be seconded or not. I'm not suggesting either one. I'm just saying, just as a reminder of that.
Is there a way of proposing to support with modification, like just an ability to?
You can do anything you.
Is now the appropriate time?
You can make a motion to propose with modification and see if there is a second. So you can definitely do that at any time.
So I would propose to support with modification.
What's the modification?
So the modification would definitely be the timelines. And the fines, I don't, like I said, that would have to be, I don't feel like the people should be penalized in those areas, but I feel like the burden should lie on the agencies being able to adjust the titles. Let me see.
So just for be more specific, so in favor of the bill with the modification of proposing a different timeline of implementation?
Yes.
Which should be longer
Yes,
than what
longer,
is being proposed, and,
and relook at the fines, because that seems very strict.
okay.
So just something, and even, I wouldn't even say, I don't know, it has to look at intention, someone's specific, to say someone should go to, it should be considered a misdemeanor, or seems
Okay.
kind of harsh.
Okay, so at the moment, thank you for that, Eleanor. At the moment, we have two proposed motion. One is to rejection of the bill from Kelly Ranasinghe. Opposed, sorry. Rejection is too harsh. Opposed. Isn't that the same thing? Well, okay. And then Eleanor proposing a support to the bill, but only if amended in regards to the time of implementations and fee associated to it. I have Abigail Ortega, and then I have Wendy Stack. I'm getting tired. Thank you.
So I do support this bill with modifications. And for me, what my experience has been is that it's a consumer protection concern. I think it's our job to educate our clients, patients on what our title is. And very often, if we're saying we're social workers, right, and we don't have a social work degree, then we are misinforming those clients with what our education is and what we can provide. There are clients, mostly Spanish-speaking clients, that call me doctor, and I could just run with that and just be like, oh yeah, they all call me doctora, but it's my responsibility to say, oh no, I'm actually a licensed clinical social worker, this is what that is. So there is a lot of that going on at different levels, and I really think it's important to really set those parameters so that patients know who they're receiving the help from. Another thing is that, I don't know where this started, but there's also a negative stigma in low-income communities where they, when they hear social work, they think child removal, right? And so I think there could be a shift in how people are open to receiving mental health counseling, from master level social workers if they do not connect, my kids are going to be removed, something bad is going to happen to me with that title. So it is common, but it's actually not a good common connotation in at least the communities of color. So I think it would increase their willingness to receive help, that it's not I'm in trouble. So those are the two things that I hear would really help the consumer. I'm not hearing that people would lose jobs, but I'm hearing that there's the bureaucratic, issues that come up whenever there's a change. And also whenever there's change, people get very riled up, right? Because all of us don't like change. So there's fear that comes in. And I'm wondering if we can, through this transition, right, that hopefully will shift the listening of what a master's level social worker is that lives beyond my lifetime. But in the meantime, can those agencies where it is difficult for them to do, make these changes within whatever period of time, can they be almost grandfathered in? And then any new positions that are created, can they use the appropriate title of mental health practitioner, mental health counselor? Those are more broad terminology that we're seeing in all of our bills, that could be applied to positions, right, new positions, and then maybe not get so fixated on like how things, like how they're structured now. So those are kind of, so I guess what my modification is, and I don't know if that's the right terminology, is grandfathering in the positions that are already there, or extending that timeline. I did hear someone say that for the LPCC, it's been like 10 years. So I don't know if like that would resolve it, expanding the time, or just kind of allowing the positions that are under social work for them to just be where they are, and then anything new, you know, to be created differently with a different listening. So that there's a transition is what I'm proposing.
Okay, Abigail, thank you so much for all of that. I'm just for a procedural, for the process, and to respect to the motions are on the floor. So at this point, I had two motions. So the first thing I'm going to ask, do we have a second for Kelly proposal to object the bill? Oppose the bill. I'm coming out with all the terminologies new. To oppose the bill. So we have the motion of Kelly. Do we have a second for that motion to begin with? Without any modification. The motion doesn't offer that at the moment. Do we have a second for the opposition to the bill? Okay. So that dies at the moment. Okay. So then we have Eleanor support for the bill with the suggested modification extending time and implementation of the bill, but also with reduced fees, they appear to be drastic. Abigail, is your proposal could be coming along with the one of Eleanor? Do you feel like they're the same?
Yeah, they are the same, and I agree with the fines being too punitive.
So if I may interpret that, so since
I can
Eleanor
second.
made a motion, you will second that?
Yes.
Max.
Okay.
But I believe she's also adding the grandfather clause, right? Does that sound?
I don't know about.
Yeah, hold on.
I think in terms of the supportive amended motions, and Sabina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we need a little bit more specific on
Right.
exactly what so like we don't like the fee that's associated, so what do we want it to look like? I can't really go in and argue for something if I don't know what exactly
Right.
I want to see.
May I give an advice, and I'm not taking positions on this, but if you're supporting a bill, then there's a lot of technicalities can be worked with the sponsors of the bill. So sometimes it's preferable to just make a motion of support, but I'm not trying to change your mind on that. I'm just saying, unless we go into details of the amendment to a point that could be, that without those amendments, you will never support the bill. This pretty much is the context. So it's not a recommendation. It will be a recommendation and not support the bill unless if those things will occur. Make sense?
I feel like Roseanne wants to say something.
So typically we do so there's support, which means we would take the bill as is. We're not asking for anything.
Right.
Support if amended, we would need to be very specific about, we want to see X, Y, and Z, including like if the fine amount's too high, like because I need to know at what point do we switch to, we're support if amended, so at what point does the amendment meet the threshold of getting our support? Like if they change the fee down $50, do I send a support letter, or is it like you want to see the fee go away, or what is that? So that would be like a support if amended, like specifics. The other option is that, sometimes if a bill, we're not necessarily opposed to anything, but we're kind of have concerns about it, we could express our concerns, but maybe take a neutral position. And so we will meet again in August, and it sounds like the sides are negotiating on this. So the next board meeting is August 17th, 18th. So in the legislative session, I think bills have to go to the governor by the beginning of September. So there will be time to take a position more later in the session for when and if the governor were to get the bill. If the bill is still around in August, we could take a position then. So those are some different options.
Options. Thank you, Roseanne. I
Right.
appreciate that. So I do have Wendy Schreck and then Justin.
And I think, Roseanne, I'm kind of tracking where you're at, and that's what I was going to suggest. We have time left in the legislative session. There's clearly a lot of opinions on the board, and both the supporters and opponents have talked about a desire to work together. So does it make sense for us to just wait a little bit, see how the bill shakes out? We have time to weigh in later. We have the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting in July. Clearly, we're all here and we've heard the board's feedback. The Policy and Advocacy Committee could certainly weigh where the bill stands then and take into account the board's conversations today. And I believe interested board members could attend or that committee meeting if they'd like to weigh in there. I'll look at Sabina for a head nod on that. So, but either way, but we have either the committee meeting or the board meeting to weigh in before the end of the legislative session, so we don't have to act today, is my point.
Right, the Policy and Advocacy Committee can't take an official position, but the committee can provide feedback, yes.
So just again, to respect of Abigail, Eleanor, that did make a motion, I'm asking them if you have this, you would like the motion to proceed and go to vote with your support to the bill, or would you like to table this as proposed by Board Member Schack to review that in the next session in August?
And if you don't take an official position today, that doesn't mean the work won't continue. That doesn't mean Roseanne won't continue tracking it and working with the authors. They're going to be
Right.
monitoring it and bringing back the information in August. You'll still have another opportunity then. So don't think it's going away forever, or the staff's just going to drop watching it or working on it if you don't take a position. If you take a neutral position, that's okay as well.
Either one of you.
Well, I don't want to speak for Eleanor, but yeah, I love that. And so neutral position?
Well, since Eleanor
Okay.
made a motion, so will be the person that will need to accept or deny the
Okay.
and then you go after if you support her position. It's okay.
Goodness. Okay, so we like to play in the sand together. So I think at this point, I'm okay to take a neutral present, so I guess change it, how would I do that?
So the options is just to withdraw your motion. The board will take not vote at this moment. So there will be not vote pro, con, against, or in favor of any other alternative. Or the other will be leaving the motion on the floor, and if Abigail supports it, then we have a vote. We have to go to vote, and then we'll see how the board will express based on your position.
Okay, so I'm okay to go ahead and change the motion to just basically table it and make it stay neutral.
Okay.
And revisit.
So it's mostly to withdraw the position. So you're
Okay,
still on
so
your
I'm
opinion.
withdrawing the
withdrawn.
position.
Yeah.
And
So unless there are any other motions on the floor, then Justin, you're next.
I'd
And
like to
then
motion to table this until the next meeting.
I don't think we need to vote on the motion that, yeah. It just, if there is no motion that moves it forward, stops it, we don't need to vote on tabling. It just doesn't happen, and that's it.
Basically, no action taken.
There is no action taken.
No,
But if
again,
we take no action today, does that mean that we will bring it up again at the August meeting? Because that was
Yes.
my,
as
Yes.
long as the bill's
Okay.
still alive.
Yes.
Yes, unless the bill dies, if the bill is dead, then we won't. But otherwise, as long as
Right.
the bill is still alive and moving, then we would talk about it at July P&A and then August 18th.
Okay, whew, that took the patience of a social worker to go through this. Sorry, no pun intended. Let's not go there. Okay, are we good? So we're moving to the next agenda item, number 34. Sorry, it's not being discussed. Correct me if wrong, Roseanne. So we're moving to number 35.
Yes.
Which is An update on the board-sponsored legislations. This should be fun.
Yes, so the board is pursuing 2 legislative proposals this year. We already talked about AB 232 at the beginning. That's our temporary practice allowance bill. That bill, as I indicated earlier, is moving along nicely. It's already passed through the Assembly and is now just made it into the Senate. So there's good news there. The amendments that we approved today, I'll be able to give the go-ahead to amend those in. And then SB 887 by the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. That bill is titled Consumer Affairs. It's the committee's omnibus bill that they run every year that basically for all of the DCA boards, it makes technical, non-controversial amendments. So the board is sponsoring 2 minor cleanup provisions in that bill. One is just including MFT trainees in a list in LEP law where they were overlooked. And then the other one is adding a section stating affirmatively that the board's online license lookup may be used to verify a license or registration. So SB 887 is currently in the Senate Appropriations Committee.
Wow, thank you, Roseanne. So are there any questions about the information? This is not, just clarifications about the updates from members of the public? No? Okay, we're moving to agenda item 36, which is update on board rulemaking proposals.
I can take that one.
That's because usually it's
usually Christine.
Christine.
Since there's not much to report, we are doing work. Really, we're working on the uniform standards currently right now in the Policy and Advocacy Committee, and that's kind of the update right now. So you'll see more of the uniform standards stuff come through in the preceding board meetings and committees in July, Policy and Advocacy in July.
July meeting.
Yeah, July meeting. So that's it for that.
Thank you, Steve. That concludes agenda item 36. We're moving to 37, which is suggestion for future agenda items from board members or members of the public. Justin Huft.
Justin Huft, I would like in future meetings to have some discussion about using surplus funds to provide financial assistance to cover licensing fees.
Our EO took note. Thank you, Justin. Any other from the board member before we go to the audience? Any suggestions? Yes, Kelly Ranasinger.
I'd like to add an item for the next board meeting to expand the board's mandate to address platforms that are advertising for therapeutic services improperly.
Thank you, Kelly. You good? Thank you. And then Dr. Walker.
I would like to explore maybe more discussions around the strategic plan objective 6.3, board engagement, possibly to include more discussion around board member leadership training, board member, nominations. I want to have a better understanding of that process. Yeah, procedures. Thank you. Something along those lines. I don't really see a lot there for us other than outreach, and maybe we could do a little bit more there around advocacy and things like that.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Okay, Ben. Oh, sorry, Eleanor.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I would like to see more mentoring happening with our older clinicians or more, experienced clinicians and our younger, our newer people coming. So I don't know if this is something, but I'd like to brainstorm or see what's out there, get some information.
In regards, to the board level, at the
mentoring, so that we
from
can
our
develop
licensees.
Yes, so we can develop that more. Yes.
Okay. I think that will be it for the board. Ben, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ben Caldwell, MFT. 2 suggestions for future agenda items. The first is for those gaining hours of experience toward licensure under the 90-day rule, they're no longer trainees, but they're also not yet associates. As such, the current statutory and regulatory language is not clear about how much supervision these folks need. I've gotten that question multiple times lately. I don't know how to direct people. So I would like to request the board work to clarify the supervision requirement for experience gained under the 90-day rule. Secondly, and forgive me if I've made note of this before, I found it in a note from an old meeting, and I'm not sure whether I voiced it then or not. The BBS is in a unique position among licensing boards in the large amount of data you all have about the progression to licensure and the professional pipeline, simply by virtue of the large registrant population that you govern. Most of that data is presented here in kind of a piecemeal format with certain points in time along that pipeline, like when people are taking their license exams, number of licenses and registrations issued, that kind of thing. And I'd like to request that in a future meeting, the board take the opportunity that's afforded by all of its data to look at the progression to licensure from a more holistic perspective. The overall progression, where are the choke points, where are the elements of difficulty along the way? What is keeping people from making it through that pipeline successfully? In advance of and to support that kind of discussion, I'd like to request that the BBS make more anonymized data sets public for review by stakeholders and external researchers whose findings might provide valuable insights that are relevant to the BBS's policymaking functions. And Steve, I'm happy to work with you to talk about like what some of those data sets might look like in accordance with what you can readily make available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any other comment, any other proposed agenda items? No? Okay, that will conclude the suggestion for future agenda items. We open public comments for items not on the agenda. Dr. Brew, go ahead.
Leah Brew, LPCC. This is probably less for the board and more for the governor's office. I am deeply concerned that we have not had an LPCC representative on this board very much at all since I left in 2020. There was one small period where we had someone. And in discussions like SB 766, we need to have a voice represented on this board, and it's not okay. Being the last person in, or the last license group into the field, we really need representation. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. And speaking about representation, I would like to share a couple of things. As you noticed today, we elected a new board president and a vice chair, so really happy about that. But also, this might be my last meeting. Oh, did I get emotional? I won't do that to you, sorry. Mostly because I was, the Senate did reach out for my appointment ends in June. I could have been selected 2 more years. The Senate reached out graciously for my reappointment, but I had to pretty much not accept. And don't worry, legal counsel, I will be nice and not compromising the board. No, there are 2 things. I just want to share a few things about this experience because I offer my availability to have to be present until a new person will be found for the board. So I'm here to support the transition, so I'm not just disappearing. But sometimes you don't know. An appointment might come sooner or later, and I might not be here in August. I just wanted to take the opportunity to also thank Dr. Leah. It's incredible you're here today because you were one of my mentors when I joined the board many years ago. The reason of my choice has to do a lot with what's happening. So, in fact, my community does need me. There is a lot, as mentioned today, anti-trans bill and a lot of violence going against our community. So I need to refocus on my community and do work as I'm doing as well. That's one of the reasons why I'm not able to continue it. But also, I invite you all. To me, it was a privilege and honor to be serving. I'm a little bit concerned about all of these delegitimizing places of democracy like this one that's going on in the state. So the invite, and I'm full confident every single board member here believes in the value of representations, and they've been speaking about that since the day one they joined, every one of you. So I'm very confident about what I'm moving away from, and I'm confident on this board. At the same time, I just want to renew the attention about what's happening and making sure that we all continue to take in full value the power of representations, but also the privilege of being in a space like this. And I say the privilege, because we have a huge responsibility to make sure that we reduce disparity, but that also we continue to do the work in protecting the public, primarily. So I just wanted to say that. Why I'm getting emotional? Because I'm tired, I guess. But I'm really, really honored, and I'm being honored to be served. If you don't see me in August, you know why. Otherwise, I'll be here August and November at top, just to make sure the transition is assured. So thank you so much.
Well, similar to.
I thought I was going to be happy because.
I wanted to thank you, Max. Thank you for your leadership. This is also my last meeting, so I wanted to thank everybody as well. I'd like to go out with you. I wanted to thank you for your leadership while I was here, Dr. Brew. You were, I think, it was when I first started, and you know, it's been a great experience for me. I really, really enjoyed it. It's very valuable. I've very much become and remained active in politics and civics and government, and I've always wanted to serve on a board, and this experience has really shown me really what a board does, and I wasn't really aware of that as much as I thought I've known, so it's really refreshing to see that everyone here you know, takes a responsibility seriously, and it was very, very much an honor and a privilege to serve with everybody here, and very much thanks to the board staff, who is amazing, and the best board staff I think that there is in the state of California. So thank you all very much, really appreciate it, and you know, keep fighting the good fight.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you for your service as well. So if there are no other comments, we are adjourned to August, because in June we will not have the petition.
Correct.
Because we are actually caught up with all the petitions hearing. So we'll see you back in August. Thank you.